Mrs. Maginty and the Cornish Cat by Anne Youngman. Anne Youngman, a British author, is particularly famous for writing children's literature. She had been writing about wolves, witches, dragons, and monsters. Her books range from picture books to full-length novels and cover an age range of 3 to 13. This novel is set in Cornwall, which lies in southwest England. The Masons go to Cornwall for their vacations every year. When you'll read the novel, you'll see that Mrs. Maginty has a cat. It's a Cornish Rex that's a breed of domestic cats, which originates in Cornwall, Great Britain. The word Cornish refers to anything that belongs to Cornwall. Let me now introduce you to the characters of Mrs. Maginty and the Cornish Cat. Rosemary, whose pet name is Rosie, is the narrator and main character of this story. She is the daughter of Graham and Jennifer Mason. Graham Mason is the son of Muriel and Arthur Mason. And here is Mrs. Maginty and her Cornish Rex Merlin. She is the housekeeper at Avalon Cottage. Chapter 1. In Chapter 1, Rosie briefly introduces all the members of her family. She also tells us that why she dislikes her annual vacation at Cornwall. She mentions that this year was especially difficult because as every family has some differences and problems, Rosie's family was not different. She also tells us that how this vacation turns out to be different from others. Let's enjoy and listen to what Rosie tells us. Rosie lives with her father and mother. She is their only daughter. Recently, Rosie comes to know that her grandparents will be moving in with them. This thought worries her and her mother a lot. She thinks that it would be very difficult living with them. She tells that Granddad had been working in Navy and he was injured in a war, and since then he had been sick. Grandmother looks after him, and this had changed her a lot. She used to be a cheerful lady, but now she is different. Granddad is also a bit bad-tempered because of the pain with which he suffers all the time. When father tells that they will have to sell out their house and move into a bigger one so that Gran and Granddad should move in with them, mother was not happy. She loved her house and she didn't want to move. Before all this would happen, it was time for the annual vacation at Cornwall. Their journey towards Cornwall was not always a happy one. They would have to squeeze in as the car was not very spacious. Rosie thought that as she was now grown up, so there was no space for everyone to sit comfortably. This irritated everybody, and the journey would end up rather messed up. But this year, it turned out to be a bit different. Though they were all squeezed up in the car, but they moved on happily, singing songs and not getting angry with each other. As they reached the Avalon cottage where they had to spend their vacations, they were very glad. The house was very pretty. It was like a picture on a postcard. It had stone walls and a thatched roof, and the garden was full of hollyhocks and lupins and flowers of every color. Behind the cottage was a woods, and behind the wood was the sun. The sky was the amazing shade of orange red. She was extremely happy to come to this place. But when she saw that the door of the cottage was open, she was worried. She thought that this was not the cottage where they supposed to be staying. And then came Mrs. Maginty, who was there to welcome her. She had prepared raspberry jam and a big pot of tea with some scones to welcome them. The Masons were rather perplexed. They had already only booked the cottage, but Mrs. Maginty was there as the housekeeper. She confirmed that she is coming along with the cottage for free, so they don't have to pay anything extra. They all were excited to know this. Mum was the gladdest. She now knew that she won't have to cook for the entire vacation and would have enough time to relax and enjoy. At supper also, everyone got on unusually well, and Rosie started wondering that was this a magical place, or was Merlin the cat a magic cat? And Mrs. Maginty, guessing her thoughts, whispered in her ear, "Why don't we let this be our little secret, dear?" And this is where the awesome time starts, where Rosie and Mrs. Maginty shares the secret that the place was no less than magic.